The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, its golden liquid pooling like a broken promise. Ethan Caldwell, New York's golden boy and real estate mogul, stood frozen, his heart pounding as Lucas Rivera's lips lingered in his Minda kiss that wasn't supposed to mean anything. How had a reckless bet spiraled into this? Ethan leaned against the penthouse balcony, the city skyline glittering below like a sea of stars. 35. He'd built an empire, his name synonymous with wealth and charm. But tonight, his polished world felt like a house of cards. The bet had been simple: marry Lucas Rivera, his high school rival, for 6 months to win a $10 million stake in a waterfront development deal. It was a game, a power play until that kiss at the altar changed everything. Lucas Rivera, 32, was everything Ethan wasn't. A street-smart artist with a chip on his shoulder, his murals adorning Brooklyn's walls. They'd clashed since their teenage years at Lincoln High, where Ethan's privileged jabs met Lucas's fiery defiance. Ethan had always won until now. The memory of Lucas's hand gripping his tie, pulling him into that unexpected, earth-shattering kiss, burned through him. It was supposed to be a performance for the cameras, a fake vow to seal the deal. So why did it feel so real? The story began 3 weeks ago at a rooftop gala in Manhattan. Ethan, in a tailored navy suit, was schmoozing investors when his old friend, Marcus Tate, proposed the bet. Marry someone outrageous. Ethan, Marcus slurred, waving a glass of bourbon. Like that artist you hate, Rivera. 6 months, and I'll hand over my stake in the Hudson Project. Ethan laughed, the idea absurd yet tantalizing. He'd always thrived on winning, and Lucas was the perfect Pavna man who'd never bend. Finding Lucas wasn't hard. Ethan tracked him to a gritty art studio in Dumbo, where paint-splattered canvases lined the walls. Lucas, in a worn leather jacket, was sketching a vibrant mural of a phoenix rising from ashes. His curly hair fell into his eyes, and Ethan hated how his pulse quickened at the sight. "What do you want, Caldwell?" Lucas asked, his voice low and wary, not looking up from his work. "A deal," Ethan said, leaning against the doorframe with his signature smirk. "Marry me for 6 months. I'll pay off your studio's debt, and you'll walk away with $1 million." Lucas's pencil snapped. His brown eyes narrowed, a storm brewing behind them. "You think I'm for sale?" He spat, stepping closer. "You're still the same arrogant jerk from high school." The tension crackled, but Ethan pressed on. "It's a game, Rivera. You get to stick it to me by living in my world, spending my money. Don't tell me you're scared." Lucas's jaw tightened, his pride a live wire. After a long silence, he said, "Fine. But when this blows up in your face, don't cry to me." The wedding was a spectacle, staged at a rooftop venue with the city as their witness. Ethan's tailored tuxedo contrasted with Lucas's black suit, a single red rose pinned to his lapel. The guests, Ethan's elite circle and Lucas's artist friends, watched in stunned silence as they exchanged vows. Ethan's voice was steady, but Lucas's was raw, each word laced with defiance. When the officiant said, "You may kiss," Lucas grabbed Ethan's tie, pulling him into a kiss that was meant to be a challenge. But the heat of it, the way Lucas's lips pressed with fierce intention, unraveled Ethan's carefully constructed control. Now, standing alone on his balcony, Ethan touched his lips, still feeling the ghost of that moment. The bet was supposed to be a power move, a way to prove he could control even Lucas Rivera. But as the city hummed below, Ethan realized he was the one losing ground. Lucas wasn't just a rival anymore, was a question Ethan didn't know how to answer. The next morning, Lucas moved into Ethan's penthouse, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. This doesn't mean I like you, Lucas said, tossing his bag onto the guest room bed. His leather jacket was gone, replaced by a fitted gray sweater that made Ethan's throat dry. Relax, Rivera, Ethan replied, forcing a grin. It's just business. But the air between them was charged, every glance a spark. Their first public appearance as a couple was at a charity gala in Soho. Ethan, in a charcoal suit, played the doting husband, his hand resting lightly on Lucas's back. Lucas, in a deep green blazer, smiled tightly, his discomfort obvious. The cameras loved them, but whispers followed. Ethan Caldwell married an artist. One socialite murmured, "He's slumming it for attention." Lucas's hand clenched into a fist, but Ethan leaned in, whispering, "Let them talk. We're winning." Lucas's eyes met his, a flicker of something gratitude, maybe, passing between them. Back at the penthouse, Lucas confronted him. "Why do you care what they think?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "You're Ethan Caldwell. You don't need their approval." Ethan shrugged, pouring a scotch. "It's not about them. It's about control." Lucas stepped closer, his breath warm. "You don't control me, Ethan. And you never will." The words hung heavy, a challenge neither could back down from. Over the next week, they fell into a tense rhythm. Lucas painted in the penthouse's unused study, his vibrant murals transforming the sterile space. Ethan caught himself watching, mesmerized by the way Lucas's hands moved, each stroke deliberate. One night, over takeout pizza, Lucas laughed a real, unguarded laugh when Ethan admitted he'd never tried street tacos. "You're missing out, rich boy," Lucas teased, and Ethan's chest tightened at the sound. But the bet loomed over them. Ethan's investors were watching, and Marcus was circling, waiting for him to slip. Lucas, too, was hiding something late-night calls he brushed off, a guarded look in his eyes. Ethan wanted to ask, but pride kept him silent. Instead, he pushed Lucas, testing his limits. "Paint something for me," Ethan said one evening, leaning against the study door. Lucas raised an eyebrow. "What, like a portrait of your ego?" Ethan grinned. "Surprise me." The painting Lucas revealed a week later stopped Ethan cold. It was a cityscape, but not the polished Manhattan Ethan knew. It was raw, chaotic, with vibrant streaks of color weaving through shadowed streets, a reflection of Lucas's world. "This is how I see you," Lucas said quietly. "All flash on the outside, but there's something real underneath. If you'd let it out." Ethan's throat closed. For the first time, he felt seen, and it terrified him. As the first month of their marriage ended, Ethan realized the bet was no longer just a game. Lucas was unraveling him, piece by piece, and that kiss at the altar was only the beginning. The question was whether Ethan could let go of his need to whine her if he'd destroy them both trying. The city rain battered Ethan's penthouse windows, a mirror to the storm brewing inside him. Lucas's painting hung in the study, its raw beauty a constant reminder of the man sleeping just down the hall. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing not the bet, but something far more dangerous. Their second month began with a clash. Ethan had scheduled a high-profile interview with a lifestyle magazine, eager to sell their love story to the public. Lucas, however, was less than thrilled. "I'm not your prop, Caldwell," he snapped, tossing the script Ethan had prepared onto the kitchen counter. At 32, Lucas carried a quiet intensity, his brown eyes flashing with defiance. "You want me to lie about us? Fine. But don't expect me to enjoy it." The interview was a disaster. The journalist, A sharp-eyed woman named Claire Voss sensed the tension immediately. Ethan, in a crisp white shirt, answered questions with his usual charm. But Lucas's responses were clipped. His arms crossed tightly. "How did you know Ethan was the one?" Claire asked, her pen poised. Lucas's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Ethan thought he'd walk out. "He's persistent," Lucas said finally, his voice dry but laced with something Claire pounced on. "Persistent," she pressed, and Ethan's heart sank. Lucas's eyes met his. A challenge. Yeah. He doesn't give up, even when he should. The article, published a week later, was brutal. Ethan Caldwell's marriage, love or publicity stunt. The headline screamed. Marcus Tate called, laughing. "Trouble in paradise. Caldwell. You're slipping." Ethan hung up, his knuckles white. He found Lucas in the study, painting a new canvas storm of reds and blacks. "You couldn't play along for 1 hour?" Ethan demanded. Lucas didn't look up. "I'm not here to stroke your ego. You wanted this marriage, not me." The words stung more than Ethan expected. He'd always been the one in control, the one who set the rules. But Lucas was a wildfire, untamed and unpredictable. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep, replaying Lucas's words, the way his hands moved across the canvas, the way his eyes softened when he thought no one was watching. Ethan hated how much he noticed. Their next public event was a Pride fundraiser in Chelsea, a test of their fragile alliance. Ethan, in a tailored blazer, mingled with donors, his hand resting lightly on Lucas's arm. Lucas, in a navy suit with a rainbow pin, was quieter than usual, his gaze distant. Ethan caught him staring at a group of young activists, their laughter bright and unburdened. "You okay?" Ethan asked, surprising himself with the softness in his voice. Lucas blinked, as if caught. "Just remembering," he said, his voice low. Ethan wanted to push, to ask what memory had stolen Lucas's fire. But a donor interrupted, and the moment was gone. Back at the penthouse, Lucas was restless, pacing the living room. Ethan watched from the couch, a glass of wine in hand. "What's eating you, Rivera?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light. Lucas stopped, his hands shoved into his pockets. "You wouldn't get it," he said, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of pain. Ethan set his glass down, standing. "Try me." Lucas hesitated, then shook his head. "Forget it. This is just a job, right?" The words were a knife, and Ethan felt the cut. The next day, Ethan found a sketchbook on the coffee table, left open to a drawing of a young man with Lucas's eyes, laughing under a streetlight. The date scrawled in the corner was 5 years old. Ethan's chest tightened. Lucas had a past, a story he wasn't sharing. When Lucas caught him looking, he snatched the book away, his face flushed. "Don't touch my stuff," he snapped, but his voice cracked. Ethan wanted to apologize, but pride stopped him. Instead, he said, "You don't have to hide everything, you know." Lucas's laugh was bitter. Says the guy who's all surface. The tension simmered, but so did the moments that caught Ethan off guard. One evening, Lucas cooked dinner tacos. Of all things, his hands deft as he chopped cilantro. "You're full of surprises," Ethan said, leaning against the counter. Lucas smirked, a rare lightness in his eyes. "Stick around, Caldwell. You might learn something." They ate on the balcony, the city lights stretching out below, and for a moment, felt real. Not a bet, not a game, just two men sharing a meal. but the cracks were widening. Marcus invited them to a private dinner, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "So, Lucas," he said, swirling his wine, "what's it like living with Ethan's ego?" The table laughed, but Lucas's smile was tight. "It's a big place. I manage." Ethan's jaw clenched. Later, in the car, he exploded. "You don't have to make me look like a fool." Lucas turned, his eyes blazing. "You think this is easy for me? Playing your perfect husband while you parade me around like a trophy." The silence that followed was deafening. That night, Ethan found Lucas on the rooftop, staring at the stars. "I didn't mean to push you," Ethan said, his voice quieter than he intended. Lucas didn't turn, but his shoulders softened. "You don't know me, Ethan, and I don't know if you ever will." The words hung between them, heavy with truth. Ethan wanted to argue, to say he saw Lucas the artist, the fighter, the man who made his heart race, but he didn't. Instead, he stood beside him, the city's hum filling the silence. As the second month ended, Ethan realized the bet was a trap he'd set for himself. Lucas wasn't just a rival or a pawn, he was a mirror, reflecting parts of Ethan he'd buried long ago. The kiss at the altar had been the first crack in his armor, but every moment with Lucas was breaking him open. The question was whether he could face what lay beneath her if he'd run from it, as he always had. The city never slept, but Ethan Caldwell was wide awake, haunted by a truth he couldn't name. Lucas Rivera's presence in his penthouse was a constant challenge, a reminder that control was slipping through his fingers. The bet, once a game, was now a battlefield where pride and desire collided. Month 3 brought a new test, a weekend retreat in the Hamptons, hosted by Marcus Tate to celebrate their marriage. Ethan dreaded it. The guest list was a who's who of New York's elite, each one eager to dissect his union with Lucas. "We need to sell this," Ethan told Lucas as they packed. His voice clipped. Lucas, in a black hoodie, rolled his eyes. "Sell what?" "Your fantasy of us as the perfect couple." Ethan's temper flared, but he bit it back. "Just don't tank us in front of Marcus." The Hamptons estate was a sprawl of glass and marble, the ocean's roar a backdrop to the glittering party. Ethan, in a linen suit, played his part, charming guests with stories of their whirlwind romance. Lucas, in a fitted blazer, was quieter, his smiles forced. But when a guest asked about their first date, Lucas surprised Ethan. "He took me to this dive bar in Brooklyn," Lucas said, his voice warm with a lie so convincing Ethan almost believed it. "He was terrible at pool, but he kept trying. It was endearing." The crowd laughed, and Ethan's heart stuttered at the word. Later, by the pool, Lucas pulled Ethan aside. "I'm doing this for the money, not for you," he whispered, his breath hot against Ethan's ear. "Don't get it twisted." But the way Lucas's hand lingered on Ethan's arm told a different story. Ethan wanted to call him out, to demand why Lucas's lies felt so real. But a guest interrupted, and the moment slipped away. The weekend wasn't all games. On the second night, Ethan overheard Lucas on a call, his voice low and urgent. "I'm trying. Okay. I just need more time." When Lucas hung up, his face was pale, his hands trembling. Ethan stepped forward, concern overriding his pride. "Who was that?" he asked. Lucas flinched, then squared his shoulders. "None of your business, Caldwell." But the crack in his voice betrayed him, and Ethan's chest tightened. Lucas was hiding something big. The next day, a beach bonfire turned tense. Marcus, ever the instigator, toasted to Ethan's bold choice in love. The jab was clear. and Lucas's jaw clenched. Ethan stepped in, his arm sliding around Lucas's waist. "Bold's my style," he said smoothly, pulling Lucas closer. The touch was meant to sell the act, but Lucas's warmth against him felt too real. Lucas didn't pull away, and for a moment, they stood united, a silent defiance against Marcus's games. Back in the city, the tension followed them. Lucas was distant, spending hours in the study, his paintings growing darker storms and shattered glass. Ethan tried to bridge the gap, leaving coffee on Lucas's desk or asking about his art. But Lucas kept him at arm's length. One night, Ethan found him sketching in the living room, a half-empty bottle of whiskey nearby. "You don't have to do this alone," Ethan said, sitting beside him. Lucas's hand stilled, his eyes searching Ethan's face. "You don't know what I'm carrying," he said softly. Ethan wanted to push, to demand answers, but the vulnerability in Lucas's gaze stopped him. Instead, Ethan shared something of his own. "I wasn't always like this," he said, staring at the city lights. "Rich, untouchable. My dad. He left when I was 10. I built this life so I'd never feel that small again." Lucas looked at him, surprised. "Why tell me now?" he asked. Ethan shrugged, his throat tight. "Because you're not the only one carrying something." The confession shifted something. Lucas started opening up, if only in fragments. He talked about his art, how it was the only way he could make sense of the world. Ethan listened, captivated by the passion in Lucas's voice. One evening, Lucas showed him a mural he'd painted in the Studio Phoenix. Its wings spread wide, rising from a city of shadows. "It's you," Lucas said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're more than you let people see." Ethan's breath caught, the words hitting deeper than he expected. But the bet was a shadow they couldn't escape. Marcus invited them to a boardroom meeting, hinting at a new development deal. "You two are quite the team," he said, his smile sharp. Ethan felt the weight of his scrutiny, knowing Marcus was waiting for them to crack. Lucas, sensing it too, played along, his hand resting on Ethan's knee under the table. The touch was electric, and Ethan's focus faltered. When they left, Lucas smirked. "You're blushing, Caldwell." Ethan scoffed, but his heart was racing. As the third month ended, Ethan realized he was in too deep. Lucas wasn't just a rival or a partner in a beta, was someone Ethan couldn't stop thinking about. The kiss at the altar had been the spark, but every moment since was kindling, building a fire Ethan wasn't sure he could control. The question was whether Lucas felt it too or if Ethan was alone in this unraveling. The city's pulse thrummed through Ethan's veins, but it was Lucas Rivera's silence that kept him awake. 4 months into their sham marriage, the lines between pretense and truth were blurring, and Ethan was drowning in the gray. The bet, once a clear path to victory, now felt like a cage of his own making. They were back in New York, the Hamptons' retreat a fading memory. Ethan threw himself into work, closing deals to distract from the questions Lucas stirred in him. But Lucas was a constant presence, his paintings spreading through the penthouse like wildfire. One morning, Ethan found a new canvas in the living room, a portrait of 2 figures, faceless but entwined, their hands reaching for something just out of grasp. "What's this one mean?" Ethan asked, his voice softer than he meant. Lucas, in a paint-splattered shirt, shrugged. "You tell me." His eyes held a challenge, and Ethan's heart skipped. Their public life was a tightrope. At a gallery opening in Tribeca, Ethan and Lucas posed for photos, their smiles practiced but their touches electric. Ethan's hand on Lucas's shoulder felt like a claim, not an act. The crowd ate it up, but Lucas's tension was palpable. "You're good at this," Lucas muttered as they left, his voice laced with something Ethan couldn't name. "At what?" Ethan asked, stopping on the sidewalk. Lucas's eyes met his, raw and unguarded. "Making people believe you feel something you don't." The words cut deep, and Ethan's temper flared. "You think I'm faking everything?" he snapped. Lucas stepped closer, his breath visible in the cool night air. "Aren't you? This is your game, Caldwell." Ethan wanted to argue, to say the feelings creeping into his chest were real, but Lucas turned away, leaving him with the weight of his own silence. The next day, Ethan found Lucas's sketchbook again, this time left open on the kitchen counter. The pages were filled with sketches of a young man always the same, always smiling, always dated years ago. Ethan's curiosity burned, but when he asked, Lucas's face closed off. "Stop digging," he said, his voice low and sharp. Ethan backed off, but the mystery gnawed at him. Who was this man? And why did Lucas guard his memory so fiercely? Their routine settled into a fragile dance. Lucas cooked dinner most nights, filling the penthouse with the scent of spices and warmth. Ethan, unused to domesticity, found himself lingering in the kitchen, watching Lucas's hands move with quiet precision. One night, over homemade empanadas, Lucas talked about his childhood in Brooklyn, raised by a single mom who worked 2 jobs. "She's why I paint," he said, his voice soft. "To make her proud." Ethan, caught off guard, shared a memory of his own sneaking into his dad's office as a kid, dreaming of building something lasting. Lucas listened, his eyes warm, and for a moment, the bet didn't exist. But reality intruded. Marcus invited them to a yacht party, another chance to parade their marriage. Ethan, in a white suit, played the part, but Lucas was restless, his gaze fixed on the horizon. When Marcus made a snide comment about Lucas's street roots, Ethan's hand tightened on his glass. "Lucas is more real than anyone here," he said, his voice steady. The crowd fell silent, and Lucas's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise breaking through his guard. Later, on the deck, Lucas murmured, "You didn't have to do that." Ethan shrugged, his heart pounding. "Yeah, I did." The turning point came unexpectedly. Late one night, Ethan found Lucas in the study, staring at a half-finished Paintinga city skyline fractured by cracks of light. "It's not done," Lucas said, his voice rough. Ethan stepped closer, their shoulders brushing. "It's already perfect," he said, meaning more than the painting. Lucas turned, their faces inches apart, and the air crackled. For a moment, Ethan thought Lucas might kiss him again, but Lucas pulled back, his expression conflicted. "This doesn't change anything," he said, but his voice trembled. The next day, Ethan overheard another of Lucas's late-night calls. "I'm handling it, Mom," Lucas said, his voice strained. "I just need a little longer." When he hung up, Ethan couldn't stay silent. "Who are you protecting?" he asked, stepping into the room. Lucas's face paled, but he didn't deny it. "My mom's sick," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "The money from this bet's for her treatment." Ethan's heart stopped. The bet, the marriage, all of it wasn't just a game for Lucas. It was survival. Ethan wanted to fix it, to offer money, anything, but Lucas's pride was a wall. "Don't," Lucas said, his eyes hard. "I didn't tell you so you could play hero." Ethan nodded, respecting the boundary, but the revelation changed everything. Lucas wasn't just his rival, was a man carrying a weight Ethan hadn't seen. As the 4th month ended, Ethan realized he wasn't fighting for the bet anymore. He was fighting for Lucas, for the man who'd painted his soul onto a canvas, who'd kissed him and broken his world apart. The question was whether Lucas could ever see him as more than the enemy he'd married. The city's lights flickered like a heartbeat, but Ethan Caldwell's pulse raced for a different reason. Lucas Rivera's confession about his mother's illness had cracked something open in him, exposing a vulnerability Ethan couldn't ignore. 5 months into their marriage, the bet felt like a distant echo, drowned out by the growing pull between them. Lucas was quieter now, his guard still up but fraying at the edges. Ethan noticed it in the small things: Lucas leaving his sketchbook open, lingering longer at dinner, his smiles less forced. One morning, Ethan found him in the kitchen, humming softly as he made coffee. The domesticity was disarming, and Ethan's chest ached with something he wasn't ready to name. "You're up early," Ethan said, leaning against the counter. Lucas glanced at him, a half-smile tugging at his lips. "Couldn't sleep." "You?" Ethan shrugged, hiding his own sleepless nights. "Same." Their public life demanded perfection. At a tech conference in Midtown, Ethan and Lucas played the happy couple, their hands brushing as they navigated the crowd. Ethan's tailored suit contrasted with Lucas's casual blazer, but their chemistry was undeniable. A reporter asked about their future, and Lucas's answer caught Ethan off guard. "We're figuring it out," he said, his voice soft but steady. "Some things you can't plan." Ethan's heart thudded, the words feeling like a promise. But the weight of Lucas's secret hung heavy. Ethan wanted to help, to ease the burden, but Lucas's pride was a fortress. One evening, Ethan found him in the study, staring at a medical bill on his phone. "Let me help," Ethan said, his voice gentle. Lucas's eyes flashed. "I don't need your charity, Caldwell." Ethan stepped closer, undeterred. "It's not charity. It's what you do for someone you—" He stopped, the word caught in his throat. Lucas's gaze softened, but he didn't speak, leaving Ethan dangling. The tension broke at a rooftop bar in Williamsburg, where they'd gone to escape the city's scrutiny. Lucas, in a black shirt that hugged his frame, laughed freely for the first time in weeks, the sound pulling Ethan in. They played darts, Lucas teasing Ethan's terrible aim. "You're hopeless," Lucas said, his eyes bright. Ethan grinned, stepping closer. "Good thing I've got you to teach me." The air shifted, their banter charged with something new. When Lucas's hand brushed Ethan's, neither pulled away. Later, under the stars, Lucas opened up. "My mom's cancer came back last year," he said, his voice low. "She's all I have. This money, it's her chance." Ethan listened, his heart breaking for the man he'd once dismissed as a rival. "You're not alone in this," Ethan said, his hand finding Lucas's. For the first time, Lucas didn't pull away, his fingers tightening around Ethan's. The moment was fleeting. Marcus Tate's next move came in the form of a charity auction, where Ethan and Lucas were expected to bid as a couple. Ethan, sensing Marcus's game, bid aggressively on a rare painting, his arm around Lucas's waist. Lucas leaned into him, playing along, but his eyes were troubled. In the car, he said, "You don't have to prove anything to him." Ethan's jaw tightened. "It's not about Marcus. It's about us." Lucas's breath hitched, but he didn't respond, leaving Ethan to wonder what us even meant. Back at the penthouse, Lucas painted with a fury Ethan hadn't seen before. The canvas was a storm of color, a figure standing alone against a fractured skyline. Ethan watched, mesmerized. until Lucas turned, his face raw. "Why do you care?" he asked, his voice breaking. Ethan stepped closer, his heart pounding. "Because you're not just a bet to me anymore." The confession hung between them, heavy and true. Lucas's eyes searched his, and for a moment, Ethan thought he saw hope. But the past wasn't done with them. Ethan found an old photo in Lucas's sketchbook, a younger Lucas with the man from his drawings, their arms around each other, smiling. The caption read, "Lucas and Jamie, 2018. Ethan's stomach twisted. When he asked, Lucas's face crumpled. "Jamie was my first love," he said, his voice barely audible. "He died 3 years ago. Car accident." Ethan's heart sank, the pieces falling into place. Lucas's guarded heart, his late-night calls, his pain. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, meaning it. Lucas nodded, his eyes wet. "I don't talk about him because it hurts too much." Ethan reached for him, pulling him into a hug. Lucas stiffened, then melted into it, his breath ragged against Ethan's shoulder. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. But it was real, a moment of trust neither could deny. As the 5th month ended, Ethan knew he was falling. The bet was a shadow, irrelevant against the light of Lucas's presence. But Lucas's heart was a battlefield, scarred by loss and duty. Ethan wanted to be his refuge. But the question remained, could Lucas let him in? Or would the ghosts of his past keep them apart? The city's hum was a distant roar, but Ethan Caldwell's world had narrowed to the man beside him. Lucas Rivera's confession about Jamie had peeled back another layer, revealing a heart scarred but still beating. 6 months in, the bet was a fading pretense, and Ethan was fighting for something he'd never expected: love. The penthouse felt different now, less a stage and more a home. Lucas's paintings lined the walls, their vibrant chaos softening the sterile space. Ethan caught himself watching Lucas more, noticing the way his brow furrowed when he sketched, the way his laugh lit up the room. One morning, Lucas made pancakes, his sleeves rolled up, flour dusting his cheek. "You're a mess, Rivera," Ethan teased, brushing the flour away. Lucas froze, his eyes meeting Ethan's, and the air crackled with unspoken possibility. Their public life was a balancing act. At a Broadway opening, Ethan and Lucas walked the red carpet, their hands clasped tightly. Ethan, in a black tux, felt the camera's weight, but Lucas's steady presence grounded him. A reporter asked about their secret to a happy marriage, and Ethan surprised himself. "It's about showing up," he said, glancing at Lucas. "Even when it's hard." Lucas's smile was small but real, and Ethan's heart soared. But Marcus Tate was never far. He invited them to a private dinner at his penthouse, his eyes gleaming with calculation. "You two are convincing," he said, raising a glass. "But how long can you keep it up?" Ethan's grip on his fork tightened, but Lucas's hand found his under the table, a silent anchor. "As long as it takes," Lucas said, his voice steady. Ethan's chest swelled with pride, but Marcus's smile was a warning. The real shift came quietly. One night, Lucas invited Ethan to his old neighborhood in Brooklyn, a place Ethan had never seen. They walked through streets alive with music and murals, Lucas's world unfolding before him. At a small park, Lucas stopped, pointing to a mural of a phoenix. "I painted this after Jamie died," he said, his voice soft. "To remember there's still light after loss." Ethan's throat tightened. "You're stronger than you know," he said, meaning every word. Lucas's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was no wall between them. Back at the penthouse, Lucas showed Ethan a new painting, a portrait of them, standing together against a city skyline, their hands almost touching. "It's us," Lucas said, his voice hesitant. Ethan stepped closer, his heart pounding. "It's perfect," he said, his fingers brushing Lucas's. The touch lingered, and Lucas didn't pull away. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of their journey settling around them. But the bet's shadow loomed. Marcus called, demanding a meeting to discuss the Hudson Project. "You're close to winning," he said, his tone mocking. "But I'm watching." Ethan hung up, his stomach churning. He found Lucas in the study, sketching. "We need to talk about the bet," Ethan said, his voice low. Lucas's pencil stopped. "What's there to talk about? It's almost over." Ethan's heart sank. "Is that all this is to you? A deadline?" Lucas's eyes flashed, but he didn't answer, leaving Ethan adrift. The next day, Lucas got a call from the hospital. His mother's condition had worsened, and he left in a rush, his face pale. Ethan followed, ignoring Lucas's protests. At the hospital, Lucas's mother, Maria, was frail but warm, her eyes sharp as she studied Ethan. "You're the one keeping my boy sane," she said, her voice weak. Ethan glanced at Lucas, who looked away, his jaw tight. "I'm trying," Ethan said, his voice thick. That night, Lucas broke. In the penthouse, he sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. "I can't lose her," he whispered. Ethan knelt beside him, his hand on Lucas's shoulder. "You won't. We'll get through this." Lucas looked up, his eyes wet but fierce. "We?" he asked, his voice trembling. Ethan nodded, his heart laid bare. "Yeah, we." The moment shifted something. Lucas leaned into Ethan, their foreheads touching, their breaths mingling. It wasn't a kiss, but it was more a promise, a tether. Ethan felt the weight of it, the truth he could no longer deny. He was in love with Lucas Rivera, and the bet was nothing compared to what they could be. As the 6th month ended, Ethan knew the final weeks would test them. Marcus was circling, the bet's deadline looming, but Ethan's heart was set. Lucas was his nemesis, his partner, his everything, and Ethan would fight to keep him, no matter the cost. The city's skyline glowed, but Ethan Caldwell's world was lit by the man beside him. Lucas Rivera had become his anchor, his challenge, his heart, and with only 2 months left in their bet, Ethan was terrified of losing him. The kiss at the altar had been the spark, but the fire between them was now undeniable. Lucas was still reeling from his mother's hospital stay, his energy split between her and their fragile marriage. Ethan tried to ease the burden, arranging for a private nurse and covering medical bills without telling Lucas. When Lucas found out, his reaction was explosive. "I told you I don't need your charity," he shouted, his eyes blazing in the penthouse's dim light. Ethan stood his ground. "It's not charity, Lucas. It's what you do for family." The word hung between them, heavy and true. Lucas's anger faltered, replaced by something softer. "You don't get to decide that for me," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Their public life was a performance, but the cracks were showing. At a real estate gala, Ethan and Lucas posed for photos, their smiles strained. Ethan's hand rested on Lucas's waist, a gesture that felt more like a plea than an act. A gossip columnist cornered them, asking about rumors of a staged marriage. Lucas's laugh was sharp. "People love a good story," he said, his eyes flicking to Ethan. "But not everything's a lie." Ethan's heart leapt, but the columnist's smirk lingered. a reminder of the world watching. Back at the penthouse, Lucas was distant, his paintings growing darker, fractured cities and shadowed figures. Ethan tried to reach him, leaving notes with coffee or sitting quietly while Lucas worked. One night, Lucas caught him staring at a canvas silhouette of two men, their hands intertwined against a stormy sky. "What do you see?" Lucas asked, his voice low. Ethan hesitated, then said, "Us." Fighting to hold on. Lucas's breath hitched, and for a moment, Ethan thought he'd crossed the distance between them. But Lucas turned away, leaving Ethan with the ache of what might have been. The turning point came unexpectedly. Ethan organized a surprise for Lucas, a visit to a community art center in Brooklyn, where Lucas's murals had inspired a new program for kids. Lucas's eyes lit up as he watched the students paint, their laughter filling the room. "You did this?" he asked Ethan, his voice soft with wonder. Ethan shrugged, his cheeks warm. "I just made a call. You're the one they admire." Lucas's hand found his, a brief squeeze that said more than words. But Marcus Tate was relentless. He invited them to a final meeting, the Hudson Project's fate on the line. "You've played a good game," Marcus said, his smile cold. "But bets have consequences." Ethan felt the weight of his words, knowing Marcus was testing their resolve. Lucas, sensing it, leaned closer, his shoulder brushing Ethan's. "We're not here to lose," he said, his voice steady. Ethan's heart swelled, but Marcus's eyes narrowed, a predator scenting weakness. That night, Lucas opened up more. Over wine on the balcony, he talked about Jamie, not just the loss, but the love. "He made me believe I could be more," Lucas said, his voice thick. Ethan listened, his heart aching for the man Lucas had loved and lost. "You still are," Ethan said, his hand covering Lucas's. "You're the strongest person I know." Lucas's eyes met his, raw and searching, and Ethan felt the world shift. The moment came without warning. Lucas leaned in, his lips brushing Ethan's snot, the fierce kiss of their wedding. But something softer, deeper. Ethan's hands found Lucas's face, pulling him closer, their breaths mingling. When they parted, Lucas's eyes were wet. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he whispered. Ethan's heart pounded. But it did. They stood there, foreheads touching, the city fading away. As the 7th month ended, Ethan knew the bet was irrelevant. Lucas was his home, his truth, his everything. But Marcus's game wasn't over, and Lucas's heart was still divided between his mother's fight, his past with Jamie, and the man he was starting to love. Ethan would fight for him, but the final month would decide if love could win. The city's pulse was relentless, but Ethan Caldwell's heart beat only for Lucas Rivera. Their kiss on the balcony had rewritten everything, turning a bet into a vow Ethan wasn't sure he could keep. With 1 month left, the stakes were higher than ever, not for the money, but for the man he loved. Lucas was different now, his guard lowering but not gone. He smiled more, his touches lingering, a hand on Ethan's arm, a glance that held too long. One morning, Ethan found him in the kitchen, sketching absent-mindedly while coffee brewed. "You're staring, Caldwell," Lucas said, a teasing lilt in his voice. Ethan grinned, leaning closer. "Can you blame me?" Lucas's cheeks flushed, and for a moment, the world was just them. Their public life was a minefield. At a charity ball in Manhattan, Ethan and Lucas danced, their bodies close, the music a shield against the world's scrutiny. Ethan's hand rested on Lucas's back, feeling the strength beneath his suit. "You're not bad at this," Lucas murmured, his breath warm against Ethan's ear. Ethan's heart raced. I've had practice. But not like this. Lucas's eyes softened, and Ethan felt the truth between them no more pretense. But Marcus Tate was a shadow they couldn't shake. He called them to his office. The Hudson Project's contract on the table. You've done well, he said, his tone mocking. But I wonder if you're in too deep. Ethan's jaw tightened, but Lucas spoke first. We're not your puppets, Marcus, he said, his voice sharp. Ethan's pride swelled, but Marcus's smile was a warning. We'll see, he said, dismissing them. Back at the penthouse, Lucas was restless, his paintings frantic blurred figures in a storm of color. Ethan watched, his heart aching. Talk to me, he said, sitting beside him. Lucas's hands stilled, his voice low. I'm scared, Ethan. Of losing Mom. Of this. He gestured between them, his eyes raw. Ethan took his hand. Steady. You won't lose me. Not if you want me. Lucas's breath hitched, and he leaned into Ethan, their lips meeting in a kiss that was desperate and true. The hospital became their second home. Lucas's mother, Maria, was stable but weak, her smile a light in the dark. Ethan sat with her when Lucas needed a break, listening to stories of Lucas's childhood. He's stubborn, like his father, Maria said, her voice fond. But he loves fiercely. Don't let him push you away. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. I won't. The turning point came at a pride event in the village, where Lucas was invited to unveil a new mural. Ethan stood in the crowd, watching as Lucas spoke, his voice steady but emotional. This is for everyone who's ever felt invisible, he said, pulling the cover off a vibrant phoenix. Its wings spread wide. The crowd cheered, but Lucas's eyes found Ethan's. A silent thank you. Later, as they walked through the festival, Lucas's hand slipped into Ethan's, their fingers intertwining. You're here, Lucas said, almost to himself. Ethan squeezed his hand. Always. But the bet's deadline was looming. Marcus invited them to a final gala, the Hudson Project's announcement the centerpiece. Ethan and Lucas arrived together, their unity a statement. Marcus's speech was laced with barbs, hinting at their temporary marriage. Ethan's temper flared, but Lucas's hand on his arm stopped him. Let him talk, Lucas whispered. We know what's real. Ethan's heart soared, but Marcus's eyes gleamed. A final challenge. That night, Lucas painted again, but this time, Ethan joined him. They worked side by side, their hands brushing as they added color to a canvas city reborn. Two figures standing together. This is us, Lucas said, his voice soft. Ethan nodded, his heart full. Yeah. As the 8th month ended, Ethan knew the truth. The bet was nothing compared to what he'd found with Lucas. But Marcus's game wasn't over, and Lucas's heart was still torn between his mother's fight, his past, and the love growing between them. Ethan was ready to fight, but the final weeks would test whether love could conquer all. The city's heartbeat was a drumroll, counting down to the end of Ethan Caldwell's bet. Lucas Rivera was no longer just his nemesis or his husband, was the man Ethan loved. And the thought of losing him was a knife to the chest. With weeks left, every moment felt like a race against time. Lucas was opening up, his walls crumbling. One evening, they sat on the penthouse balcony, sharing a bottle of wine. Lucas talked about his dreams opening an art school, giving kids like him a chance. Ethan listened, captivated by the fire in Lucas's eyes. You could do it, Ethan said, his voice warm. Lucas smiled, a rare softness. With you cheering me on. Maybe. The words were light, but they carried weight. A glimpse of a future neither had dared to imagine. Their public life was a performance, but the lines were blurring. At a charity auction, Ethan bid on a sculpture Lucas admired, his hand resting on Lucas's knee. When they won, Lucas's laugh was genuine, his hand squeezing Ethan's. "You're ridiculous," he said, but his eyes sparkled. Ethan grinned. "Only for you." The crowd noticed, their chemistry undeniable, but Marcus Tate's presence was a cold reminder of the bet stakes. Marcus called them to his office, his smile sharp. "1 month left," he said, leaning back in his chair, ready to admit this was a mistake. Ethan's temper flared, but Lucas's calm voice cut through. "The only mistake was underestimating us," he said, his hand finding Ethan's. Marcus's eyes narrowed, but Ethan felt a surge of pride. They were a team now, unbreakable. Back at the penthouse, Lucas was painting a vibrant mural of a city at dawn. 2 figures standing together, their hands clasped. Ethan watched, his heart full. "You're incredible," he said, stepping closer. Lucas turned, his eyes soft. "You're not so bad yourself, Caldwell." They laughed, the sound easing the tension. But Lucas's phone buzzed, a hospital update, and his face fell. Ethan pulled him close, his arms a shield. "We'll get through this," he said, meaning it. The hospital visits were grueling, but Ethan was there, holding Lucas's hand through every update. Maria's condition was improving, but the fight wasn't over. One night, she pulled Ethan aside. "You love him," she said, her eyes sharp. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "More than I thought I could." Maria smiled. "Then don't let him go." The final test came at a pride parade, where Lucas marched with his art collective, Ethan by his side. The crowd's energy was electric, rainbow flags waving under the summer sun. Lucas's mural was Unveil Ida Phoenix soaring over a city of light, a tribute to resilience. Ethan watched, his heart swelling as Lucas spoke to the crowd, his voice strong. "This is for everyone who's ever fought to be seen," he said, his eyes finding Ethan's. The crowd cheered, but Ethan only saw Lucas, his love laid bare. That night, they returned to the penthouse, exhausted but alive. Lucas pulled Ethan into the study, showing him a new painting, their city, their story, 2 figures embracing under a sky of stars. "This is us," Lucas said, his voice trembling. Ethan cupped his face, their lips meeting in a kiss that was soft, desperate, real. "I love you," Ethan whispered, the words spilling out. Lucas's eyes widened, then softened. "I love you too," he said, his voice breaking. But the bet's shadow lingered. Marcus invited them to a final dinner, the Hudson Project's fate sealed. "You've surprised me," he said, his tone grudging. "But bet's end. Ethan, what happens next?" Ethan's hand found Lucas's under the table, their fingers intertwining. "That's up to us," he said, his voice steady. Lucas squeezed his hand, a silent agreement. As the 9th month ended, Ethan knew the truth. The bet had been a spark, but Lucas was the fire. They'd built something real, something worth fighting for. But the final days would test whether their love could outlast the gamer, if Marcus's shadow would tear them apart. The city's lights burned bright, but Ethan Caldwell's world was illuminated by Lucas Rivera's love. The bet's deadline loomed, a ticking clock that threatened to unravel everything they'd built. Ethan wasn't fighting for Marcus Tate's approval anymore, was fighting for a future with the man who'd changed him. The final days were a whirlwind. Lucas's mother, Maria, was released from the hospital, her treatment funded by the bet's payout. Ethan and Lucas celebrated quietly, cooking dinner in the penthouse, their laughter filling the space. Lucas's hand brushed Ethan's as they chopped vegetables, and the touch was a promise. "You're stuck with me now," Lucas teased, his eyes warm. Ethan grinned, his heart full. Good. Their public life was the final performance. At a gala to announce the Hudson Project, Ethan and Lucas stood together, their hands clasped. Marcus took the stage, his smile tight. "Ethan's won his bet," he said, the words dripping with disdain. "But let's see if his marriage lasts." The crowd murmured, but Ethan's voice cut through. "This isn't about the bet," he said, turning to Lucas. "It's about us." Lucas's eyes shone, and he squeezed Ethan's hand. A silent vow. Back at the penthouse, the truth spilled out. Lucas sat Ethan down, his sketchbook open to a new drawing. Two men, their hands joined, a city rising behind them. "I was scared," Lucas said, his voice soft. "After Jamie, I didn't think I could love again. But you made me believe." Ethan's throat tightened, his hand finding Lucas's. "You made me better," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't want this to end." It didn't. The bet's deadline passed, but Ethan and Lucas stayed, their marriage no longer a game. Marcus signed over the Hudson Project, his defeat clear, but Ethan didn't care about the win. He cared about the man beside him, the one who'd painted his soul onto a canvas, who'd kissed him and rewritten his world. 1 year later, they stood in Brooklyn, unveiling a new Murala Phoenix, its wings wide, soaring over a city of light. Lucas's art school was thriving, funded by Ethan's support, a testament to their shared dream. As the crowd cheered, Ethan pulled Lucas close, their lips meeting in a kiss that echoed their first fierce. Transformative. Real. "I love you," Ethan whispered, his voice steady. Lucas smiled, his eyes bright. "I love you too." The city stretched out before them, a canvas of possibility. The bet had been a spark, but their love was the fiery flame that burned brighter than any game, any doubt, any past. Ethan and Lucas had found each other, not as enemies, but as partners. Their story a testament to the power of love to heal, to build, to last. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.